Hey there! So this is the design space setup for my pop-up 3D flower bouquet, and there's just a few things you're going to need to know when you're setting this up inside of design space. This is a print then cut project, and the reason for that is because it is the simplest way to get a variety of colors together without having to cut dozens and dozens of pieces and layering them in cardstock. It's possible, but it would take a lot more time, and there would be a lot more room for error when it comes to lining up all of these little slits that you see here that put the bouquet together. There'd be a lot more error in that. I do include an SVG cut file with all the layers for those of you who would like to take that approach if you don't have a printer. I'm also going to link a very affordable printer in the blog post for this below, so if you're someone who doesn't have a printer, there's lots of affordable options out there if you're wanting to do this and follow along. So the print and cut process is the easiest way to get this look without too much work. This is considered a more intermediate to advanced project, so if you are brand new to Cricut, I recommend visiting my blog posts below for troubleshooting tips, as well as some other resources if you're new to Cricut design space or Cricut machines in general. So to get started here with what we're going to need to do to set up is you need to bring your images in, and you'll just use that upload button right here on the left hand side of the design panel, and you would just upload your images via this button and browse your computer. All these images are free on my blog, and you can download them inside the freebie vault, and there's information on that linked inside of the blog post, which is below this video. So if you're not familiar with bringing everything into design space, I have a separate post on information with that, and I will link it for you as well. So you can see here I've uploaded a bunch of my different images. I have several color varieties that I've included, so hopefully there's something for everybody there. You'll find something you love, and you would just select these and then bring them into design space, which I've already done here. So once you're in here, there's just a couple things we're going to need to do. First, we're going to need to make sure these are sized correctly. So since we're working with PNG images, they're going to kind of import at like one static size generally, unless you save it to be really huge, which of course I'm not going to do because then it's going to have a hard time loading in the software. So I include all of these measurements in the blog post, so you can just make sure that you set them and that they are going to come out correctly and everything's going to line up correctly for you. The way you would change the measurements if needed is just right up here in the edit bar where it says size, width by height, and you would just type these numbers in and hit enter, and it would resize them. Make sure that lock icon stays on so that everything stays proportional, and I've written all of these in the blog post below so you can make sure that everything is sized just as mine is. You're going to, of course, have some limitations with sizing here. My bouquet turned out to be a little over 9 inches tall, which is a decent size, but Cricut Design Space will not let you go bigger than that with print and cut projects, so just be mindful of that. If I were to expand this, you see a little yellow exclamation point over here. That means that it will not print because it is too large. Reason for this being is Cricut needs to have space for registration marks to be able to know how to cut the image out accurately. So like I said, just follow those measurements. And then the next thing we need to do here for setup is once you've brought all 4 of these pieces in, all 4 of the colored pieces that are print and cut, you're going to need to duplicate them. So for these 2 center pieces right here, I'm just going to drag and select. I'm going to use that duplicate button in the top right hand side of the screen, and I'm going to duplicate both of those and bring them down. While they're still selected, you need to mirror these, because when they print, we need to make sure that we can line them up on the other side, which means they need to be a mirrored counterpart. So I'm going to go over to flip in the edit bar, and I'm going to select flip horizontally, and it now has mirrored the design the opposite way. Everything's still the same size, we just needed a mirrored copy of these. Now for these 2 pieces over here, let me get this out of the way. For these 2 pieces over here, you're going to do exactly the same thing, but we're going to need 4 of them, so that means we're going to need 8 pieces total because we have to mirror each of the 4 pieces, right? So the first thing to do here is to just again select and then click duplicate, bring it down, and go to flip flip horizontal. Then go ahead and select all 4 of those pieces, each of those 2 with their mirrored counterparts, and then just duplicate that entire thing once and bring it down. Okay, so that's how many pieces you're going to need to build this. You're going to need ultimately 8 of these, with each one having a mirror, and then you'll need 4 of these, each one being a mirror of each of those designs as well. The last piece you're going to need, which is technically optional, but it does finish the bouquet off a little bit more, is the base wrap here, and this is just going to sort of finish the very bottom of our bouquet off a little bit. And again, just type in these measurements. You're going to bring this in as one file. It's going to be an SVG file. You'll bring it in via the upload button, just as before. But when you bring it in, when you select it, make sure that you ungroup it first. And let's come up to the top of my layers panel here, and you see here where we have these black lines. These are just lines sitting over the top of them. And the purpose of this is to create score lines. So once you bring this in, ungroup it, select just those black outlines, come over to your line type here and go down to score so that we can change that to a score line. Then you need to drag over both the base piece and that score line and use your attach tool in the bottom of the layers panel. That way that the score lines stay exactly where they're supposed to be, and that's just going to give you perfect folds so that you're not trying to fold it on your own and messing it up in any way. You can score with the Maker or the Explorer. If you're using the Explorer, just use your scoring stylus, and the Maker is the scoring wheel. Okay, so that is what you need to do to set up this project inside of Design Space. When you would go to the Make It screen or the Cut screen, you'll be presented with 12 sheets, 13 if you count the base, and you're going to start at the very top, and you'll hit Continue, and then you'll send this to the printer. You're going to send to printer, you're going to load it into your machine and cut, and you're going to repeat for each one of these pieces. So I would just click send to printer, make sure the bleed stays on. What that means is it's going to print with a little bit of extra color so that it'll be edge to edge color. You won't result in a thin white border around your design, which is really important for a clean looking design. And you'll just go ahead and hit print. It'll print off, and then I'm gonna show you how I printed it and loaded it onto my Cricut machine. And like I said, you're gonna do that for each one of these pieces. I use 65-pound cardstock for this. All this information is in the blog post below, and you can read all of those details. And I'll use my medium cardstock cut setting for my machine. And again, those details are below. So let's jump forward and let's go ahead and go over the assembly of this project. Okay, so this is just one example of I sent my image to my printer and it's now printing off. This is an HP printer that I own. It cost me, I think, $50 at Best Buy, so very affordable. You can see it works fairly well. So you're going to do this with each one of your pieces as Cricut prompts you, and then we're going to go over and load this onto our machine. I'm using a light blue mat here, which is the light grip mat, and that generally works best for cardstock. And I have placed this in the top left corner, and then I'm going to load it into my machine when that arrow button is flashing, and I'll make sure that you select medium cardstock if you're using 65-pound cardstock like I am or something similar. Go ahead and print that click that go button when Cricut tells you to. It's going to take a second to read the registration marks, which is that black line around your image, and then it'll cut out. Once it's done cutting out, you can go ahead and pull it out of your machine. And first take off the outline around it, the extra waste that we don't need. Then flip over the mat and gently peel the mat away from the cardstock piece, because this will help minimize the curling of the paper so that you're not dealing with like the more intricate edges being like drastically curled to where things aren't going to lay flat for you easily when you're trying to align the pieces together.
Alright, so once you get all of your pieces cut out with your Cricut machine, all your print and cut pieces done, you're going to work on taping the mirror counterparts back to back so that everything is going to be double-sided in color. And you can use like a liquid glue for this. I tried a glue stick. It can work, but the thing is because you're working with ink, Sometimes when you're working with liquid glue, it can kind of get everywhere and it'll sort of spread the ink colors. So I recommend, if you can, using like an adhesive scrapbooking tape. This is a Tombow brand, and I'm going to link it in the blog post about this craft as well, so you'll have all the links to find this. So the easiest way to do this is to work a little at a time. So I like to start on the more intricate areas. So in this case, it'd be like the top. And you're going to run your tape runner all the way to the edge. It's very important that you pay close attention to getting that tape like all the way to the edges of this design. So kind of just roll it and let it kind of run off, and you'll get some on the surface you're working on, so just be prepared for that. You can clean it up if you do it right afterwards. If not, maybe use like an extra piece of paper that you don't mind disposing. So I'm just paying close attention that I'm getting all these little pieces here, and I'm going to start at the top, and then I will add more tape as I work down. That way things aren't catching on me down here with glue that I haven't, or with tape that I haven't had a chance to align yet. Okay, so this is a little tricky, I won't lie, but if you just take your time, it's completely possible. These pieces are probably the most challenging. The rest of them are obviously not as complex because of the nature of the way this is built. So these are definitely easier. You might want to start with one of these pieces first just to get a feel for it. So there we go. I have that now back to back, and you're going to of course repeat that with all of your pieces, and then we're going to move to assembly. All right, so I have all my pieces taped back to back here. You can glue them, like I said. And we're going to start the assembly process of this. So you're going to start with the two center pieces here. And this piece here has sort of the openness at the top, and this one has the openness at the bottom. So you're just going to slide those two together. It can work best to just work with them kind of in a flat way first. Don't think about making them 3D yet. Just work with the paper gently, and we'll make it look 3D here in just a minute. Just be patient with it. This is a process, so wiggle and go slow, and it will come together for you. Okay. There we go. I got that on. And now you'll notice here on the stem that there's these little tabs and there's little slits in the opposite one, and you're just going to want to poke those through. Again, take your time. This just helps it be a little more stable when it's assembled, so it doesn't wiggle as much as it would if it didn't have these little tabs. So, getting that all in place there, and as you do that, it's going to naturally start to sort of turn into sort of two right angles. And just kind of work with the paper for a minute, get it all situated before you move on. If anything doesn't feel like it's sitting correctly, just work with it until it does. You don't want to go any further until these two pieces are very well matched. Go through, after every time that you add something together, you add a piece on, go through and check your edges, especially around the top, and make sure that you just press the tape back together with them. Sometimes because the tape is the one I'm using is like a permanent adhesive, but it takes a little time to set. So if you notice any of the edges kind of opening up, that probably just means that the tape wasn't fully set yet, and if you just push it back together, it will be fine. So just check your edges there. And if you notice anywhere where you missed some tape, like I'm noticing one little flower right here, you can come in and very carefully add a little bit, stick it on there, and that fixed that. It's easy to sometimes miss the little intricate pieces. Alright, so that is pretty good with that as a start. Now we're going to start adding on these other pieces here. So the one you're going to want to add on first, or the two I should say you're going to add on first, is going to be this piece. It's going to be the one that has the two slits at the top and the one in the center, okay? And it really doesn't matter which side you add it to initially, because they're pretty much all very similar. But what I do want to point out is that you can see here that these are exactly the same, but you could also turn them different directions. So when you put these on, don't put them on so that they're both facing the same direction. Put them on so that each side is mirroring the other when it's actually being slid onto the bouquet. So I'm doing it so that this large pink flower is going to be over here, and this large pink flower is going to be over here when I slide these onto these pieces here in just a second. If you do it the other way, it works, but it's going to make your bouquet look a little lopsided because everything has a different shape to it. And this side of the flower is higher than this side of the flower cluster. And if you mirror them on the other side to each other, then it's going to keep the bouquet looking nice and even. So just a little tip for you there. And if you don't do it right the first time, you can of course just pull it off. There's no reason you can't pull it off. So I'm just going to take this and slide it right down there. Make sure you get it all the way down. You'll be able to tell pretty easily if it's all the way down. So I'm going to get this one over here. I have that big pink flower on this side, so I'm going to make sure this big pink flower is over here. And gently. Your bouquet might be a little wobbly at this point, and that's normal, so just be patient again with it. And again, mine's going in nice and firm, but I can tell it's not all the way down, so I need to just take a minute, slide it a little bit more until I get it. There we go. Alright, and at this point, again, it's still going to be a little wiggly and all over the place. Adding these pieces helps it be more stabilized. So this piece here is your 3 slit piece, and that's going to go right down on each side of the 3 slits that we have remaining here. Once again, you can see I have these pink tulips in this example here. I'm going to do them on opposite sides. So if one pink tulip is going to the right over here, I'm going to have this pink tulip going to the left, and that's just going to balance it out. So I'm going to go ahead and add this one. This is the trickiest part because you're lining up 3 different slits together. So try and start with the first one and just go slow with it and be patient. After you do them a few times, it does come a little bit easier, but it's you know, a multi-step project, so. Okay, here we go. Now your centerpiece might have a tendency to sort of like kind of go the opposite direction, so you might need to come in there and just sort of like mess with it until it sits up correctly, and it should sit up correctly if you get everything aligned properly. Just take a minute and perfect the alignment a little bit. It's just going to take you a moment or two. Work with the paper a little bit more, and then we're going to add the base on, which helps stabilize it even more so. Okay, that piece there. So there we go. It's coming together now. It'll stabilize a little bit more once we get that that last piece on here. So you should have something that initially looks like this. Has a nice 3D little look. And then we're going to add on the finishing part here. If you don't want to add on this last part, you just want to leave it like this, then that's totally fine. If you want it to be a little more stable, a little more finished, then you'll want to cut the additional square that is included, and it has also score lines for you to score with your cutting machine, and you'll just fold along those score lines. And then you can come in here, and these little slots, you're going to slip one side per slot. Then you're going to need to add some glue. For this part, I would recommend maybe using a hot glue just to close it off quickly, but I just have tape, so I'm just going to tape that real quick. Get that aligned. There we go. All right, now you just want to look at the bottom and you want to get it all one side per slot. So it should line up on each side. And you should see 4 little squares sort of form, and you'll know you have it correct. Great, so there we have it. Now that I got the base on, everything is nice and stable. It's coming together. You should sort of see 4 little square slots in the center. Obviously, you're seeing this right now from a top angle, which isn't how you're going to be looking at it when it's sitting on a table. You're going to be seeing it more like this. So it's just something really different compared to a traditional card, a great Mother's Day project, something that you can DIY and say, I made this, has that special homemade touch to it. And of course, if you want to collapse it, then you'll just take it. It helps to put your 4 fingers in the bottom here with those 4 little squares right there, and just lay it down, and everything should collapse just like that. And then when you want to reopen it, again, stick your 4 fingers down in those little slots, and use your other hand and just wiggle it up until it opens. Just like that. And then you can set it back up on a table. Here's also the purple one that I did. I have a few different options as far as color options, if you like one color selection over the other. And that is how I make those pop-up flower bouquets. Obviously, I would not say this is a simple project. This is a bit of an advanced project. Be patient with yourself. Make sure you read that blog post I mentioned that is linked below this video because it has a bunch of troubleshooting tips. I include exact measurements for each of these pieces that I used on my Cricut in Design Space so that you can make sure you have all the right measurements as well, which of course will really help how all of this comes together. So I hope you guys like this. I would love to see what you are making and how yours turned out. Feel free to come over and leave me a comment on the blog or come post in my Facebook group, and I will see you all there.